The technologies behind green energy have been improving for decades, and honestly, they just continue to do so. So increasingly, solar power, wind power, and batteries. I mean, first of all, they're cheaper than they've ever been on the whole, getting cheaper every year, and cheaper than fossil fuels in most parts of the world for generating electricity. And by the way, on the demand side, electric cars continue to get cheaper. In some cases, the models are now at parity with their petrol equivalents. Heat pumps keep getting cheaper. So both the supply of clean electricity and the technologies to use it are cost competitive with fossil fuels, and in many ways an upgrade. I think most 94% of people who got an electric car would never go back because it's a better experience. Well, looking at the latest European car sales, mentioning that, yes, EV car sales are going up, but the overall market is really shuddering, and we've seen a decline in sales. It's expensive, isn't it, to do all of this upgrading, to move towards cleaner energy. Are investors still interested? Is there a fissure between US and European investors when it comes to green investment? First of all, Octopus, for example, has always been clear. The reason to back us as a company has been that we're creating superior solutions, cheaper and better for consumers and users than the ones they replace. If it's just a sort of greenwashing, box-ticking exercise, investors are right to be sceptical. But I think on that question about does it have a future, the genie's out of the bottle, right? We're halfway across this highway. The worst place to stop when you're halfway across a highway is in the middle. We're at the point now where, I know, for example, look, China last year was responsible for 60% of the renewables built in the world. And they're not doing that because they're nice people, although, they may or may not be. They're doing that because energy is the primary input to their industrial machine, and that renewables let them take control and bring costs down. We've just been through a global, certainly pan-European, pan-Asian fossil fuel crisis. Right, 15x was the increase in the wholesale price of gas. We don't want to go there again. But you bring up a really good point. China is not just investing in solar panels. They also have coal-fired power stations that they're building. They're also building nuclear. They haven't said goodbye to the polluting methods of the past. They've just diversified, and they're doing it all at such enormous scales when you look at the numbers. So no, I was asking more about the nuance of whether your investors are getting more nervous because that the US is effectively kind of turning its back on the green energy future, isn't it? Well, we can look at what happened in the last Trump government. Going into it, Trump had said coal is the future of energy, and during that period in office, the use of coal in the US energy system fell by 40%. Because the reality is, companies want cheaper power, and the cheapest stuff is coming from renewables, which is why Texas, not exactly kind of known for its sort of greenery, is the home to the highest proportion of renewables in the US, because you can build stuff and this is cheap. Now, you said earlier, isn't it going to be expensive to build all this? Well, the reality is that when you automate a factory and put robots in, on day one it's expensive, but you're doing it because it brings costs down. And it's the same here. Once you've built renewables, you don't have to pay for your input costs anymore. Now, that's effective. The big problem we've got is in most countries, you've got a single grid run by regulated stuff with the government, and they're not reforming grids and the markets in the ways that will bring costs down from renewables. So, for example, here in the UK, the price of electricity is set every half hour by the most expensive unit generated anywhere in the country, which is nearly always gas. If we break the UK into regions and set the price in each region, most of the time, most of the regions will be set by renewables and will be a lot cheaper. But more than that, the electricity generated in those regions that goes to other regions would be cheaper as well. And you bring the cost down. It's what they've done in Denmark, Norway, Sweden. All of them seeing lower electricity prices. The northeast of the US, Texas, Australia. If you want to bring energy prices down as a result of renewables, you have to reform the market. But hang on, Labour Party's not committed to that at all. They're reversing. They're going back on their green pledges, in recent months, certainly since the election. That's one of the main policy areas that they have kind of reversed and ditched. And also on that point of investment, Britain's got a major problem with its housing stock. I mean, you talked about the price of
of boilers and heat pumps and so on coming down in the UK. But that is a massive hurdle. Britain's got to make that investment. And actually, householders haven't shown willing to do that, to spend money on getting rid of the old gas boiler and bringing in a new, greener option, have they?
And there's no doubt that policymakers need to move faster. The reality is, if they don't reform the market, for example, in electricity, they are on the horns of the dilemma, which is they've still got their massive target of clean power by 2030, but they've also got their commitment to bring bills down. You can achieve both of those if you reform the market, because, for example, today, the biggest offshore wind farm in the UK is paid to not generate 71% of the time. Market reform would change that. There's no point of paying to build huge wind farms and they're not using them.
Are you seeing any signs that Starmer and Rachel Reeves are going to do something like that?
I know they're taking it very seriously because, look, the reality is they don't want to row back on the sort of big green energy commitments. They may adjust at the edges.
But the top line commitment is not in doubt. It's always about the road of how you get there. The big promise is easy, and then paving that road is very hard.
That's right. And look, I mean, someone in government said to me, they've never faced lobbying like that from the incumbents to prevent reform. Look, incumbents always love free money. But just like dealing with agricultural reform in Europe, where a lot of the traditional farmers didn't like the reform, in the end it was brought in and the food prices came down. We all continued to eat. And in fact, the best farmers were able to make more money because they invest in stuff people wanted, not the stuff that got the subsidies. Now, you mentioned their housing, right? So if you want to see what's really possible here, we now work with 8 of the 10 biggest house builders to build homes with heat pump, solar panel and battery that will never have an energy bill. We underwrite 10 years of no energy bills because in a clean energy world, these technologies can reduce costs. A driver with an electric vehicle on an intelligent tariff can drive for 6 times less per mile than a driver with a petrol car. And if you've got a battery that goes both ways, I can discharge as well as charge, we can give you 20,000 kilometres a year of free driving. That's kind of what happens if you innovate on the top of these technologies. Yeah,
which sounds amazing. I mean, who wouldn't want something like that? But again, I don't want to be negative, but the government's target of 1.5 million new homes by the end of the Parliament, which was a huge promise, one of the big promises that helped them win the last election, again, is something that they aren't sure that they can meet. So again, what is going to be in the government's industrial strategy, in the planning reform, that's actually going to deliver all the stuff that people look at and think, oh, sounds quite good. When's the delivery?
Well, first of all, I mean, you're right to mention planning. They made big announcements on that. There's definitely been some progress, and I hear some optimism from people in the various industries that need to build stuff. But on the big picture thing there, for example, it'd be a lot easier to build these new homes if you didn't have to build gas pipes to them. So if we electrify heating, which, by the way, provides, I think, consumers with heat pumps rate their heating system about 8.5 out of 10, and people with gas boilers 7.5 out of 10. It's better for consumers, but it will also make building easier. So look, you've got the opportunity with all these technologies to build a better world, faster and cheaper. It's just whether they've got the appetite to take on incumbents. Now, I've enjoyed my last 8.5 years taking on incumbents. We've gone from zero to market leadership in the UK. We're on huge growth trajectories in other countries. And we've done so because we focus entirely on delivering good results for customers. I would hope governments recognise that customers are voters. And, if they take the same view and don't listen to the siren voices of incumbents that are being disrupted, I think they've got the chance to deliver these kind of results too.